Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive, honestly kind of mind-blowing topic, the hidden mechanics of wealth inequality, and taking a hard look at the sociological illusion of the casteless meritocracy. We all intuitively know that inequality is rising, right? But the actual structural reasons why that wealth locks into place are fascinating, deeply historical, and, as you'll see, often completely invisible to the naked eye.
Right off the bat, let's look at this stark warning from a modern billionaire about the ticking time bomb of extreme wealth inequality. When analyzing historical macro studies, analysts have found that when wealth inequality peaks to the absolute extremes we currently see in places like the US and the UK, the system literally just cannot sustain itself. It inevitably resets. And the frightening part of this research is that peaceful policy changes almost never fix this kind of extreme inequality.
History actually shows us these extremes are usually broken by one of three pretty catastrophic triggers: total civil collapse, mass mobilization warfare, or just a total revolution. When a system becomes structurally incapable of distributing wealth, the pressure simply builds until the dam breaks. So to figure out how we avoid that, we're going to break this down into 5 quick steps: the inequality breaking point, class versus caste systems, the alchemy of merit, hiding in plain sight, and lastly, the sociological pressure valve. All right, kicking things off with part 1, the inequality breaking point and the threat of societal collapse. Look, if history proves that peaceful policy tweaks almost never fix extreme inequality, we really have to look at the structural plumbing, the systems that lock all this wealth in place to begin with. It's not just about some people having more money than others, it's about the architecture of society itself becoming completely rigid. When the pathways to upward mobility are entirely blocked, society reaches a structural breaking point that absolutely demands a pressure valve.
Which brings us to part 2, class versus caste systems, and defining the chasm between them.
Now, there's a huge fundamental difference here. A class system, that's primarily economic and it's fluid. It's based on achieved status, meaning you can move up or down based on your market success, your education, or, even just luck. But a caste system is a totally different beast. It's hereditary, strictly closed, and based on ascribed status. You are born into it, and vertical mobility is structurally impossible, literally no matter how hard you work or how much money you make.
So here is the massive sociological puzzle we're trying to unravel today. How on earth does a theoretically open, fluid meritocracy calcify into a closed dynasty? How exactly do elite upper classes manage to essentially mimic a hereditary caste, locking in their wealth across generations, while simultaneously convincing everyone else that the system is still this fair, open meritocracy?
Let's dive into part 3, the alchemy of merit, and how elite privilege gets enshrined.
Drawing on sociologist David Moss's work, we see elites using a few specific tactics to keep their spot at the top. First, there's elite endogamy, which is basically keeping marriage and family formation strictly inside their own socioeconomic and cultural bubble. Then there's strategic adaptability, or disinvestment. The second a field like state bureaucracy becomes heavily regulated or democratized, elites quickly abandon ship to establish fresh monopolies in new unregulated frontiers, like global IT and venture capital. Ultimately, this allows them to seamlessly convert traditional caste capital, things like inherited social networks or land control, straight into modern capital.
So what happens is, elites essentially cash in their inherited networks. They rebrand their historical head start into prestigious degrees and top-tier tech roles, and then, here's the real kicker, they claim their preeminence is just due to pure individual intellectual talent. It's casteless merit. It is a masterful sociological rebranding exercise that completely hides the hereditary networks that gave them the head start in the first place.
If you want to see this happening on the ground, just look at sociologist Dana Kornberg's research on Delhi's waste economy. It's fascinating. She shows how 2 different groups working equally hard are trapped in entirely separate caste-defined tracks to build wealth. Informal recycling gets relegated to oppressed castes doing manual door-to-door labor. Meanwhile, formal recycling is managed by dominant castes utilizing heavy machinery and lucrative government contracts. Guys, they aren't just different jobs. They are entirely separate institutional systems tied directly to inherited social value.
Moving right along to part 4, hiding in plain sight and the immense power of anonymity.
Take a close look at this table. Sociologist Satish Deshpande points out something profound about this asymmetric stratification. The elite secure the ultimate privilege, which is being completely anonymous. They get to adopt a professional identity of their choosing, entirely overriding their inherited advantages. But the lower classes,
They're forced into hyper-visible, marked categories. They have to politically mobilize purely on the basis of their identity, just to claim basic resources, rendering their social markers indelibly engraved on them for life. By claiming they've just moved past social divisions entirely, the elite basically hide their inherited privilege in plain sight inside what's called the general category. Deschmondet's work highlights that this general category acts as an impenetrable fortress. It protects these hereditary networks under the very clever guise of an unmarked, universal middle class. So they get to enjoy the fruits of a locked-in monopoly while pretending they're just normal folks participating in a fair, open market. And this is definitely not a new trend. If you track it historically, from the formation of landless agricultural labor, right through the 1890s where elites cleverly rebranded caste as just a religious custom to dodge the abolition of slavery across the British Empire, all the way to today's modern cloud computing enclaves, elites continuously use ideological and cultural regimes to lock in their fiscal monopolies. The mechanism changes, sure, but the structural hoarding of wealth remains remarkably consistent. Which leads us to our final stop, Part 5. The sociological pressure valve and an alternative to total collapse. So here's the big question. If the elite have so successfully hoarded wealth behind this camouflage of merit, and if peaceful policy tweaks fail to address this level of structural inequality, how does a society actually let off steam? How do we avoid the civil collapse or the warfare that historically follows these massive wealth peaks?
Well, based on the sociological work of Satish Deshpande and David Massey, the source material details how caste warfare operates as a nonviolent alternative to that catastrophic civil collapse. And to be clear, the texts neutrally frame caste warfare not as physical violence in the streets, but as a crucial structural political mechanism. It is the active political mobilization by subaltern groups to completely shatter the elite's anonymity by exposing their hidden lineages and forcing true structural accountability onto the system.
By forcing the elite back into a marked, accountable category, this political mobilization acts as a nonviolent pressure valve. It exposes their so-called general meritocratic identity for what it truly is, a closed, upper caste lineage. And by shattering that anonymity, it fundamentally disrupts the seamless conversion of caste capital into modern capital. It forces the system to actually look at the hereditary networks at play, breaking the illusion of a casteless meritocracy before structural inequality can tear the entire society apart. So, I'm going to leave you with this to ponder. When you look around at the highly successful people leading our modern institutions, our tech companies, our economies, who is forced to carry the heavy weight of their background? And who truly gets the privilege of remaining completely anonymous? I highly encourage you to keep exploring these hidden mechanics of our world. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.